Book 11, Chapter 2 of the Brothers Karamazov. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Brothers Karamazov by Fyodor Dostoyevsky. Translated by Constance Garnett. Book 11, Chapter 2 The Injured Foot. The first of these things was at the house of Madame Holakov, and he hurried there to get it over as quickly as possible and not be too late for Mitya. Madame Holakov had been slightly ailing for the last 3 weeks. Her foot had for some reason swollen up, and though she was not in bed, she lay all day, half reclining on the couch in her boudoir, in a fascinating but decorous deshabille. Alyosha had once noted with innocent amusement that, in spite of her illness, Madame Holakov had begun to be rather dressy. Top-knots, ribbons, loose wrappers had made their appearance, and he had an inkling of the reason, though he dismissed such ideas from his mind as frivolous. During the last 2 months, the young official, Peretin, had become a regular visitor at the house. Alyosha had not called for 4 days, and he was in haste to go straight to Liza. As it was with her, he had to speak. For Liza had sent a maid to him the previous day, specially asking him to come up to her about something very important, a request which, for certain reasons, had interest for Alyosha. But while the maid went to take his name in to Liza, Madame Holakov heard of his arrival from someone, and immediately sent to beg him to come to her just for 1 minute. Alyosha reflected that it was better to accede to the mamma's request, or else she would be sending down to Liza's room every minute that he was there. Madame Holakov was lying on a couch. She was particularly smartly dressed, and was evidently in a state of extreme nervous excitement. She greeted Alyosha with cries of rapture. "It's ages, perfect ages since I've seen you. It's a whole week, only think of it. Ah, but you were here only 4 days ago, on Wednesday. You have come to see Liza. I'm sure you meant to slip into her room on tiptoe, without my hearing you. My dear, dear Alexey Fyodorovitch, if you only knew how worried I am about her. But of that later, though that's the most important thing, of that later. Dear Alexey Fyodorovitch, I trust you implicitly with my Liza. Since the death of Father Zosima, God rest his soul," she crossed herself, "I look upon you as a monk, though you look charming in your suit. Where did you find such a tailor in these parts? No, that's not the chief thing, of that later. Forgive me for sometimes calling you Alyosha. An old woman like me may take liberties," she smiled coquettishly, "but that will do later too. The important thing is that I shouldn't forget what is important. Please remind me of it yourself. As soon as my tongue runs away with me, you just say, 'The important thing?' Ah, how do I know now what is of most importance? Ever since Liza took back her promise, her childish promise, Alexey Fyodorovitch, to marry you, you've realized, of course, that it was only the playful fancy of a sick child who had been so long confined to her chair. Thank God, she can walk now. That new doctor Katia sent for from Moscow for your unhappy brother, who will tomorrow... But why speak of tomorrow? I am ready to die at the very thought of tomorrow. Ready to die of curiosity. That doctor was with us yesterday and saw Liza. I paid him 50 rubles for the visit. But that's not the point. That's not the point again. You see, I'm mixing everything up. I am in such a hurry. Why am I in a hurry? I don't understand. It's awful how I seem unable to understand anything. Everything seems mixed up in a sort of tangle. I am afraid, you are being so bored, you will jump up and run away, and that will be all I shall see of you. Goodness! Why are we sitting here and no coffee? Yulia Glafira, coffee!" Alyosha made haste to thank her, and said that he had only just had coffee. "Where?" At Arfenia Alexandrovna's. At that woman's? Ah, it's she has brought ruin on everyone. I know nothing about it, though. They say she has become a saint, though it's rather late in the day. She had better had done it before. What use is it now? Hush, hush, Alexey Fyodorovitch, for I have so much to say to you that I am afraid I shall tell you nothing. This awful trial, I shall certainly go. I am making arrangements. I shall be carried there in my chair. Besides, I can sit up. I shall have people with me, and you know I am a witness. How shall I speak? How shall I speak? I don't know what to say. One has to take an oath, hasn't one? Yes, but I don't think you will be able to go. I can sit up. Ah, you put me out. Ah, this trial, this savage act. And then they are all going to Siberia. Some are getting married, and all this so quickly. So quickly, everything's changing, and at last, nothing. All grow old and have death to look forward to. Well, so be it. I am weary. This Katya, cette charmante persona, has disappointed all my hopes. Now she is going to follow one of your brothers to Siberia, and your other brother is going to follow her, and will live in the nearest town, and they will all torment one another. It drives me out of my mind. Worst of all, the publicity. The story has been told 1,000,000 times over in all the papers in Moscow and Petersburg. Ah, yes, would you believe it? There's a paragraph that I was a dear friend of your brother's. I can't repeat the horrid word. Just fancy. Just fancy. Impossible! Where was the paragraph? What did it say? I'll show you directly. I got the paper and read it yesterday. Here, in the Petersburg paper Gossip. The paper began coming out this year. I am awfully fond of gossip, and I take it in, and now it pays me out. This is what gossip comes to. Here it is. Here, this passage. Read it. She handed Alyosha a sheet of newspaper which had been under her pillow. It was not exactly that she was upset. She seemed overwhelmed, and perhaps everything really was mixed up in a tangle in her head. The paragraph was very typical, and must have been a great shock to her, but, fortunately perhaps, she was unable to keep her mind fixed on any one subject at that moment, and so might race off in a minute to something else and quite forget the newspaper. Alyosha was well aware that the story of the terrible case had spread all over Russia, and, good heavens, what wild rumors about his brother, about the Karamazovs, and about himself he had read in the course over these 2 months, among other equally credible items. One paper had even stated that he had gone into a monastery and become a monk, in horror at his brother's crime. Another contradicted this, and stated that he and his elder, Father Zosima, had broken into a monastery chest and made tracks from the monastery. The present paragraph in the paper Gossip was under the heading, "The Karamazov Case at Skotoprigonyevsk." That, alas, was the name of our little town. I had hitherto kept it concealed. It was brief, and Madame Holakov was not directly mentioned in it. No names appeared, in fact. It was merely stated that the criminal, whose approaching trial was making such a sensation, retired army captain, an idle swaggerer, and reactionary bully, was continually involved in amorous intrigues, and particularly popular with certain ladies, who were pining in solitude. One such lady, a pining widow, who tried to seem young though she had a grown-up daughter, was so fascinated by him that only 2 hours before the crime she offered him 3,000 rubles, on condition that he would elope with her to the gold mines. But the criminal, counting on escaping punishment, had preferred to murder his father to get the 3,000, rather than go off to Siberia with the middle-aged charms of his pining lady. This playful paragraph finished, of course, with an outburst of generous indignation at the wickedness of parricide and at the lately abolished institution of serfdom. Reading it with curiosity, Alyosha folded up the paper and handed it back to Madame Holakov. "Well, that must be me," she hurried on again. "Of course I am meant. Scarcely more than an hour before, I suggested gold mines to him, And here they talk of middle-aged charms, as though that were my motive. He writes that out of spite. God Almighty forgive him for the middle-aged charms, as I forgive him. You know it's... Do you know who it is? It's your friend, Rakitian." "Perhaps," said Alyosha, "though I've heard nothing about it." "It's he! It's he! No perhaps about it. You know I turned him out of the house. You know all that story, don't you?" "I know that you asked him not to visit you for the future, but why it was I haven't heard, from you at least." "Ah, then you've heard it from him. He abuses me, I suppose, abuses me dreadfully." "Yes, he does. But then he abuses everyone. But why you've given him up, I haven't heard from him either. I meet him very seldom now, indeed. We are not friends." "Well, then I'll tell you all about it. There's no help for it. I'll confess, for there is one point in which I was perhaps to blame. Only a little point, so little that perhaps it doesn't count. You see, my dear boy," Madame Holakov suddenly looked arch, and a charming, though enigmatic, smile played about her lips. "You see, I suspect... You must forgive me, Alyosha. I am like a mother to you. No, quite the contrary. I speak to you now as though you were my father. Mother's quite out of place. Well, it's as though I were confessing to Father Zosima. That's just it. I called you a monk just now. Well, that poor young man, your friend, Rakitian. Mercy upon us, I can't be angry with him. I feel cross, but not very. That frivolous young man, would you believe it, seems to have taken it into his head to fall in love with me. I only noticed it later. At first, a month ago, he only began to come oftener to see me, almost every day, though, of course, we were acquainted before. I knew nothing about it, and suddenly it dawned upon me, and I began to notice things with surprise. You know, 2 months ago, that modest, charming, excellent young man, Ilyich Perhotin, who's in the service here, began to be a regular visitor at the house. You met him here ever so many times yourself. And he is an excellent, earnest young man, isn't he? He comes once every 3 days. Not every day, though I should be glad to see him every day, and always so well dressed. Altogether, I love young people, Alyosha. Talented, modest like you, and he has almost the mind of a statesman. He talks so charmingly, and I shall certainly, try and get promotion for him. He is a future diplomat. On that awful day he almost saved me from death by coming in the night. And your friend Rakitian comes in such boots, and always stretches them out on the carpet. He began hinting at his feelings, in fact, and one day, as he was going, he squeezed my hand terribly hard. My foot began to swell directly after he pressed my hand like that. He had met Pyotr Ilyich here before, and would you believe it, he is always gibing at him, growling at him for some reason. I simply looked at the way they went on together and laughed inwardly. So I was sitting here alone. No, I was laid up then. Well, I was lying here alone, and suddenly Rakitian comes in. And, only fancy, brought me some verses of his own composition. A short poem on my bad foot. That is, he described my foot in a poem. Wait a minute. How did it go? A captivating little foot. It began somehow like that. I can never remember poetry. I've got it here. I'll show it to you later. But it's a charming thing. Charming. And, you know, it's not only about the foot. It had a good moral, too. A charming idea. Only I've forgotten it. In fact, it was just the thing for an album. So, of course, I thanked him, and he was evidently flattered. I'd hardly had time to thank him when in comes Pyotr Ilyich, and Rakitian suddenly looked as black as night. I could see that Pyotr Ilyich was in the way, for Rakitian certainly wanted to say something after giving me the verses. I had a presentiment of it, but Pyotr Ilyich came in. I showed Pyotr Ilyich the verses and didn't say who was the author, but I am convinced that he guessed, though he won't own it to this day, and declares he had no idea, but he says that on purpose. Pyotr Ilyich began to laugh at once and fell to criticizing it. Wretched doggerel, he said they were. Some divinity student must have written them, and with such vehemence, such vehemence. Then, instead of laughing, your friend flew into a rage. Good gracious, I thought, they'll fly at each other. It was I who wrote them, said he. I wrote them as a joke, he said, for I think it degrading to write verses, but they are good poetry. They want to put a monument to your Pushkin for writing about women's feet, while I wrote with a moral purpose, and you, said he, are an advocate of serfdom. You've no humane ideas, said he. You have no modern enlightened feelings. You are uninfluenced by progress. You are a mere official, he said, and you take bribes. Then I began screaming and imploring them. And, you know, Pyotr Ilyitch is anything but a coward. He at once took up the most gentlemanly tone, looked at him sarcastically, listened, and apologized. I'd no idea, said he. I shouldn't have said it if I had known. I should have praised it. Poets are all so irritable, he said. In short, he laughed at him under cover of the most gentlemanly tone. He explained to me afterwards that it was all sarcastic. I thought he was in earnest. Only as I lay there, just as before, you know, I thought, would it or would it not be the proper thing for me to turn Rakitian out for shouting so rudely at a visitor in my house? And, would you believe it, I lay here, shut my eyes, and wondered, would it be the proper thing or not? I kept worrying, and my heart began to beat, and I couldn't make up my mind whether to make an outcry or not. One voice seemed to be telling me, speak, and the other, no, don't speak. And no sooner had the second voice said that than I cried out and fainted. Of course there was a fuss. I got up suddenly and said to Rakitian, "It is painful for me to say it, but I don't wish to see you in my house again." So I turned him out. Ah, Alexey Fyodorovitch, I know myself I did wrong. I was putting it on. I wasn't angry with him at all, really, but I suddenly fancied, that was what did it, that it would be such a fine scene. And yet, believe me, it was quite natural, for I really shed tears, and cried for several days afterwards, and then suddenly, one afternoon, I forgot all about it. So it's a fortnight since he's been here, and I kept wondering whether he would come again. I wondered even yesterday, then suddenly last night came this gossip. I read it and gasped. Who could have written it? He must have written it. He went home, sat down, wrote it on the spot, sent it, and they put it in. It was a fortnight ago, you see. But, Alyosha, it's awful how I keep talking and don't say what I want to say. The words come of themselves. It's very important for me to be in time to see my brother today, Alyosha faltered. To be sure, you bring it all back to me. Listen, what is an aberration? What aberration? Asked Alyosha, wondering. In the legal sense. An aberration in which everything is pardonable. Whatever you do, you will be acquitted at once. What do you mean? I'll tell you. This Katya, she is a charming creature, only I never can make out who it is she is in love with. She was with me some time ago, and I couldn't get anything out of her, especially as she won't talk to me except on the surface now. She is always talking about my health and nothing else, and she takes up such a tone with me too. I simply said to myself, well, so be it, I don't care. Oh yes, I was talking of aberration. This doctor has come. You know a doctor has come. Of course you know it, the one who discovers madmen. You wrote for him. No, it wasn't you but Katya. It's all Katya's doing. Well, you see, a man may be sitting perfectly sane and suddenly have an aberration. He may be conscious and know what he is doing, and yet be in a state of aberration. And there's no doubt that Dmitry Fyodorovitch was suffering from aberration. They found out about aberration as soon as the law courts were reformed. It's all the good effect of the reformed law courts. The doctor has been here and questioned me about that evening, about the gold mines. How did he seem then? He asked me. He must have been in a state of aberration. He came in shouting, 'Money! Money! 3,000! Give me 3,000!' and then went away and immediately did the murder. 'I don't want to murder him,' he said, and he suddenly went and murdered him. That's why they'll acquit him, because he struggled against it, and yet he murdered him." "But he didn't murder him," Alyosha interrupted rather sharply. He felt more and more sick with anxiety and impatience. "Yes, I know, it was that old man Grigory murdered him." "Grigory!" cried Alyosha. "Yes, yes, it was Grigory. He lay as Dmitry Fyodorovitch struck him down, and then got up, saw the door open, went in, and killed Fyodor Pavlovitch." "But why? Why?" "Suffering from aberration. When he recovered from the blow Dmitry Fyodorovitch gave him on the head, he was suffering from aberration. He went and committed the murder. As for his saying he didn't, he very likely doesn't remember. Only, you know, it'll be better, ever so much better, if Dmitry Fyodorovitch murdered him. And that's how it must have been, though I say it was Grigory. It certainly was Dmitry Fyodorovitch. And that's better, ever so much better. Oh, not better that a son should have killed his father. I don't defend that. Children ought to honor their parents, and yet it would be better if it were he, as you'd have nothing to cry over then, for he did it when he was unconscious, rather than when he was conscious, but did not know what he was doing. Let them acquit him. That's so humane, and would show what a blessing reformed law courts are. I knew nothing about it, but they say they have been so a long time. And when I heard it yesterday, I was so struck by it that I wanted to send for you at once. And if he is acquitted, make him come straight from the law courts to dinner with me, and I'll have a party of friends, and we'll drink to the reformed law courts. I don't believe he'd be dangerous. Besides, I'll invite a great many friends, so that he could always be let out if he did anything. And then he might be made a justice of the peace or something in another town, for those who have been in trouble themselves make the best judges. And besides, who isn't suffering from an aberration nowadays? You, I, all of us, are in a state of aberration, and there are ever so many examples of it. A man sits, singing a song. Suddenly something annoys him. He takes a pistol and shoots the first person he comes across, and no one blames him for it. I read that lately, and all the doctors confirm it. The doctors are always confirming. They confirm anything. Why, my Liza is in a state of aberration. She made me cry again yesterday, and the day before too. And today I suddenly realized that it's all due to aberration. Oh, Liza grieves me so. I believe she's quite mad. Why did she send for you? Did she send for you, or did you come of yourself?" "Yes, she sent for me, and I am just going to her." Alyosha got up resolutely. "Oh, my dear, dear Alexey Fyodorovitch, perhaps that's what's most important," Madame Holakov cried, suddenly bursting into tears. "God knows I trust Liza to you with all my heart, and it's no matter her sending for you on the sly without telling her mother. But, forgive me, I can't trust my daughter so easily to your brother Ivan Fyodorovitch, though I still consider him the most chivalrous young man. But only fancy, he's been to see Liza, and I know nothing about it." "How? What? When?" Alyosha was exceedingly surprised. He had not sat down again, and listened standing. "I will tell you. That's perhaps why I asked you to come, for I don't know now why I did ask you to come. Well, Ivan Fyodorovitch has been to see me twice, since he came back from Moscow. First time he came as a friend to call on me, and the second time Katia was here, and he came because he heard she was here. I didn't, of course, expect him to come often, knowing what a lot he has to do as it is. Vous comprenez, cette affaire est la mort terrible de votre papa. You know, this affair and your father's terrible death. But I suddenly heard that he's been here again, not to see me, but to see Liza. That's 6 days ago now. He came, stayed for 5 minutes, and went away. and I didn't hear of it till 3 days afterwards, from Glafira, so it was a great shock to me. I sent for Liza directly. She laughed. He thought you were asleep, she said, and came in to me to ask after your health. Of course that's how it happened. But Liza, mercy on us, how she distresses me. Would you believe it? One night, 4 days ago, just after you saw her last time, and had gone away, she suddenly had a fit. Screaming, shrieking, hysterics. Why is it I never have hysterics? Then, next day, another fit. And the same thing on the third, and yesterday too. And then yesterday that aberration. She suddenly screamed out, "I hate Ivan Fyodorovitch! I insist on your never letting him come to the house again." I was struck dumb at these amazing words, and answered, "On what grounds could I refuse to see such an excellent young man, a young man of such learning too, and so unfortunate, for all this business is a misfortune, isn't it?" She suddenly burst out laughing at my words, and so rudely, you know. Well, I was pleased. I thought I had amused her and the fits would pass off, especially as I wanted to refuse to see Ivan Fyodorovitch anyway on account of his strange visits without my knowledge, and meant to ask him for an explanation. But early this morning Liza waked up and flew into a passion with Yulia, and, would you believe it, slapped her in the face. That's monstrous. I am always polite to my servants. And an hour later she was hugging Yulia's feet and kissing them. She sent a message to me that she wasn't coming to me at all, and would never come and see me again, and when I dragged myself down to her, she rushed to kiss me, crying, and as she kissed me, she pushed me out of the room without saying a word, so I couldn't find out what was the matter. Now, dear Alexey Fyodorovitch, I rest all my hopes on you, and, of course, my whole life is in your hands. I simply beg you to go to Liza and find out everything from her, as you alone can, and come back and tell me, her mother, for you understand it will be the death of me, simply the death of me, if this goes on, or else I shall run away. I can stand no more. I have patience, but I may lose patience. And then something awful will happen. Ah, dear me, at last, Peter Ilyitch!" cried Madame Holakov, beaming all over as she saw Perhotin enter the room. "You are late, you are late. Well, sit down. Speak. Put us out of suspense. What does the council say? Where are you off to, Alexey Fyodorovitch?" "To Liza." "Oh, yes, you won't forget what I asked you. It's a question of life and death." "Of course I won't forget, if I can, but I am so late," muttered Alyosha, beating a hasty retreat. "No, be sure but to come in. Don't say 'if I can.' I shall die if you don't," Madame Holakov called after him, but Alyosha had already left the room. End of Chapter 2 of Book 11. Recording by Katie Riley. May 2009.
Book 11, Chapter 3 of The Brothers Karamazov. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Luke Cordas. The Brothers Karamazov by Fyodor Dostoyevsky. Translated by Constance Garnett. Book 11, Chapter 3, A Little Demon. Going in to Liz, he found her half reclining in the invalid chair in which she had been wheeled when she was unable to walk. She did not move to meet him, but her sharp, keen eyes were simply riveted on his face. There was a feverish look in her eyes, her face was pale and yellow. Alyosha was amazed at the change that had taken place in her in 3 days. She was positively thinner. She did not hold out her hand to him. He touched the thin, long fingers which lay motionless on her dress, then he sat down facing her without a word. "I know you're in a hurry to get to the prison," Liz said curtly. "And Mama's kept you there for hours. She's just been telling you about me and Yulia." "How do you know?" asked Alosha. "I've been listening." "Why do you stare at me? I want to listen, and I do listen. There's no harm in that. I don't apologize." "You are upset about something?" "On the contrary, I am very happy. I've only just been reflecting for the 30th time what a good thing it is I refused you and shall not be your wife. You're not fit to be a husband. If I were to marry you and give you a note to take to the man I loved after you, you'd take it and be sure to give it to him and bring an answer back too. If you were 40, you would still go on taking my love letters for me." She suddenly laughed. "There is something spiteful and yet open-hearted about you," Alosha smiled to her. "The open-heartedness consists in my not being ashamed of myself with you. What's more, I don't want to feel ashamed with you, just with you. Alosha, why is it that I don't respect you? I am very fond of you, but I don't respect you. If I respected you, I shouldn't talk to you without shame, should I?" "No." "But do you believe that I am not ashamed with you?" "No, I don't believe it." Liz laughed nervously again. She spoke rapidly. "I sent your brother, Dmitry Fyodorovich, some sweets in prison. Alosha, you know, you are quite pretty. I shall love you awfully for having so quickly allowed me not to love you." "Why did you send for me today, Liz?" "I wanted to tell you of a longing I have. I should like someone to torture me, marry me, and then torture me, deceive me, and go away. I don't want to be happy." "You are in love with disorder?" "Yes, I want disorder. I keep wanting to set fire to the house. I keep imagining how I'll creep up and set fire to the house on the sly. It must be on the sly. They'll try to put it out, but I'll go on burning, and I shall know and say nothing. Ah, what silliness! And how bored I am!" She waved her hand with a look of repulsion. "It is your luxurious life," said Alosha softly. "Is it better than to be poor?" "Yes, it is better." "That's what your monk taught you. That's not true. Let me be rich and all the rest poor. I'll eat sweets and drink cream and not give any to anyone else. Don't speak, don't say anything." She shook her head at him, though Alosha had not opened his mouth. "You've told me all that before. I know it all by heart. It bores me. If I am ever poor, I shall murder somebody, and even if I'm rich, I may murder someone, perhaps. Why do nothing? But do you know I should like to reap, cut the rye? I'll marry you, and you shall become a peasant, a real peasant. We'll keep a colt, shall we? Do you know Kolganov?" "Yes." "He's always wandering about, dreaming. He says, 'Why live in real life? It's better to dream. One can dream the most delightful things, but real life is a bore.' But he'll be married soon for all that. He's been making love to me already." "Can you spin tops?" "Yes." "Well, he's just like a top. He wants to be wound up and set spinning, and then to be lashed with a whip. If I marry him, I'll keep him spinning all his life. You're not ashamed to be with me?" "No." "You are awfully cross because I don't talk about holy things. I don't want to be holy. What will they do to one in the next world for the greatest sin? You must know all about that. God will censure you." Alosha was watching her steadily. "That's just what I should like. I would go up and they would censure me, and I would burst out laughing in their faces. I should dreadfully like to set fire to the house, Alosha. To our house. You still don't believe me?" "Why? There are children of 12 years old who have a longing to set fire to something, and they do set things on fire too. It's a sort of disease." "That's not true. That's not true. There may be children, but that's not what I mean. You take evil for good. It's a passing crisis. It's the result of your illness, perhaps." "You do despise me, though. It's simply that I don't want to do good. I want to do evil, and it has nothing to do with illness." Why do evil? So that everything might be destroyed. Ha! How nice it would be if everything were destroyed. You know, Alosha, I sometimes think of doing a fearful lot of harm and everything bad, and I should do it for a long while on the sly, and suddenly everyone would find out. Everyone will stand round and point their fingers at me, and I would look at them all. That would be awfully nice. Why would it be so nice, Alosha? I don't know. It's a craving to destroy something good, or, as you say, to set fire to something. It happens sometimes. I not only say it, I shall do it. I believe you. How I love you for saying you believe me, and you are not lying one little bit. But perhaps you think that I am saying all this on purpose to annoy you. No, I don't think that. Though perhaps there is a little desire to do that in it too. There is a little. I never can tell lies to you, she declared with a strange fire in her eyes. What struck Alosha above everything was her earnestness. There was not a trace of humor or jesting in her face now, though in old days fun and gaiety never deserted her even at her most earnest moments. There are moments when people love crime, said Alosha thoughtfully. Yes, yes, you have uttered my thought. They love crime. Everyone loves crime, they love it always, not at some moments. You know, it's as though people have made an agreement to lie about it and have lied about it ever since. They all declare that they hate evil, but secretly they all love it. And are you still reading nasty books? Yes, I am. Mama reads them and hides them under her pillow, and I steal them. Aren't you ashamed to destroy yourself? I want to destroy myself. There's a boy here who lay down between the railway lines when the train was passing. Lucky fellow. Listen, your brother is being tried now for murdering his father, and everyone loves his having killed his father. Loves his having killed his father? Yes, loves it. Everyone loves it. Everybody says it's so awful, but secretly they simply love it. I, for one, love it. There is some truth in what you say about everyone, said Alosha softly. Oh, what ideas you have! Liza shrieked in delight. And you a monk, too! You wouldn't believe how I respect you, Alosha, for never telling lies. Oh, I must tell you a funny dream of mine. I sometimes dream of devils. It's night, I am in my room with a candle, and suddenly there are devils all over the place, in all the corners, under the table, and they all open the doors. There's a crowd of them behind the doors, and they want to come and seize me. And they're just coming, just seizing me. But I suddenly cross myself, and they all draw back. Though they don't go away altogether, they stand at the doors and in the corners, waiting. And suddenly I have a frightful longing to revile God aloud, and so I begin, and then they come crowding back to me delighted, and seize me again, and I cross myself again, and they all draw back again. It's awful fun. It takes one's breath away. I've had the same dream, too, said Alosha suddenly. Really? Cried Liza, surprised. I say, Alosha, don't laugh. That's awfully important. Could two different people have the same dream? It seems they can. Alosha, I tell you, it's awfully important. Liza went on with really excessive amazement. It's not the dream that's important, but you having the same dream as me. You never lie to me. Don't lie now. Is it true? You're not laughing. It's true. Liz seemed extraordinarily impressed, and for half a minute she was silent. Alosha, come and see me. Come and see me more often, she said suddenly in a supplicating voice. I'll always come to see you, all my life, answered Alosha firmly. You are the only person I can talk to, you know, Liz began again. I talk to no one but myself and you, only you in the whole world. and to you more readily than to myself, and I am not a bit ashamed with you, not a bit. Alyosha, why am I not ashamed with you, not a bit? Alyosha, is it true that at Easter the Jews steal a child and kill it? I don't know. There's a book here in which I read about the trial of a Jew who took a child of 4 years old and cut off the fingers from both hands, and then crucified him on the wall, hammered nails into him and crucified him, and afterwards, when he was tried, he said that the child died soon, within 4 hours. That was soon. He said the child moaned, kept on moaning, and he stood admiring it. That's nice. Nice? Nice. I sometimes imagine that it was I who crucified him. He would hang there moaning, and I would sit opposite him eating pineapple compote. I am awfully fond of pineapple compote. Do you like it? Alyosha looked at her in silence. Her pale, sallow face was suddenly contorted. Her eyes burned. You know, when I read about that Jew, I shook with sobs all night. I kept fancying how the little thing cried and moaned. A child of 4 years old understands, you know. And all the while the thought of pineapple compote haunted me. In the morning I wrote a letter to a certain person, begging him particularly to come and see me. He came, and I suddenly told him all about the child and the pineapple compote. All about it. All. And said that it was nice. He laughed and said it really was nice. Then he got up and went away. He was only here 5 minutes. Did he despise me? Did he despise me? Tell me, Alyosha, did he despise me or not? She sat up on the couch with flashing eyes. Tell me, Alyosha asked anxiously, did you send for that person? Yes, I did. Did you send him a letter? Yes. Simply to ask about that? About the child? No, not about that at all. But when he came, I asked him about that at once. He answered, laughed, got up, and went away. Oh, that person behaved honorably, Alyosha murmured. And did he despise me? Did he laugh at me? No, for perhaps he believes in the pineapple compote himself. He is very ill now, too, Liz. Yes, he does believe in it, said Liz with flashing eyes. He doesn't despise anyone, Alyosha went on, only he does not believe anyone. If he doesn't believe in people, of course, he does despise them. Then he despises me. Me? You too. Good. Liz seemed to grind her teeth. When he went out, laughing, I felt that it was nice to be despised. The child with fingers cut off is nice, and to be despised is nice. And she laughed in Alyosha's face, a feverish, malicious laugh. Do you know, Alyosha, do you know, I should like... Alyosha, save me! She suddenly jumped from the couch, rushed to him, and seized him with both hands. Save me, she almost groaned. Is there anyone in the world I could tell what I've told you? I've told you the truth, the truth. I shall kill myself because I loathe everything. I don't want to live because I loathe everything. I loathe everything, everything. Alyosha, why don't you love me in the least? She finished in a frenzy. But I do love you, answered Alyosha warmly. And will you weep over me, will you? Yes. Not because I won't be your wife, but simply weep for me? Yes. Thank you. It's only your tears that I want. Everyone else may punish me and trample me underfoot, everyone. Everyone, not excepting anyone. For I don't love anyone. Do you hear? Not anyone. On the contrary, I hate him. Go, Alyosha, it's time you went to your brother. She tore herself away from him suddenly. How can I leave you like this? Said Alyosha, almost in alarm. Go to your brother. The prison will be shut. Go. Here's your hat. Give my love to Mitya. Go, go!" And she almost forcibly pushed Alosha out of the door. He looked at her with pained surprise, when he was suddenly aware of a letter in his right hand, a tiny letter folded up tight and sealed. He glanced at it and instantly read the address: "To Ivan Fyodorovich Karamazov." He looked quickly at Liz. Her face had become almost menacing. "Give it to him, you must give it to him," she ordered him, trembling and beside herself. "Today, at once, or I'll poison myself. That's why I sent for you." And she slammed the door quickly. The bolt clicked. Alosha put the note in his pocket and went straight downstairs without going back to Madame Holakov, forgetting her, in fact. As soon as Alosha had gone, Liz unbolted the door, opened it a little, put her finger in the crack and slammed the door with all her might, pinching her finger. 10 seconds after, releasing her finger, she walked softly, slowly to her chair, sat up straight in it, and looked intently at her blackened finger and at the blood that oozed from under the nail. Her lips were quivering, and she kept whispering rapidly to herself, "I am a wretch, 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 wretch." End of chapter 3 of book 11. Recording by Luke Cordes.
Chapter 4 of the Brothers Karamazov. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Bob Sherman. The Brothers Karamazov by Fyodor Dostoyevsky, translated by Constance Garnett. Book 11, Chapter 4, A Hymn and a Secret. It was quite late, days are short in November, when Alyosha rang at the prison gate. It was beginning to get dusk, but Alyosha knew that he would be admitted without difficulty. Things were managed in our little town as everywhere else. At first, of course, on the conclusion of the preliminary inquiry, relations and a few other persons could only obtain interviews with Mitya by going through certain inevitable formalities. But later, though the formalities were not relaxed, exceptions were made for some, at least, of Mitya's visitors. So much so that sometimes the interviews with the prisoner in the room set aside for the purpose were practically tete-a-tete. These exceptions, however, were few in number. Only Grushenka, Alyosha and Rakitin were treated like this. But the captain of the police, Mikhail Mikhailovich, was very favourably disposed to Grushenka. His abuse of her at Mokroe weighed on the old man's conscience, and when he learned the whole story he completely changed his view of her. And strange to say, though he was firmly persuaded of his guilt, yet after Mitya was once in prison, the old man came to take a more and more lenient view of him. He was a man of good heart, perhaps, he thought, who had come to grief from drinking and dissipation. His first horror had been succeeded by pity. As for Alyosha, the police captain was very fond of him, and had known him for a long time. Rakitin, who had of late taken to coming very often to see the prisoner, was one of the most intimate acquaintances of the police captain's young ladies, as he called them, and was always hanging about their house. He gave lessons in the house of the prison superintendent, too, who, though scrupulous in the performance of his duties, was a kind-hearted old man. Alyosha again had an intimate acquaintance of long standing with the superintendent, who was fond of talking to him, generally on sacred subjects. He respected Ivan Fyodorovitch and stood in awe of his opinion, though he was a great philosopher himself, self-taught, of course. But Alyosha had an irresistible attraction for him. During the last year the old man had taken to studying the apocryphal Gospels, and constantly talked over his impressions with his young friend. He used to come and see him in the monastery, and discussed for hours together with him and with the monks. So even if Alyosha were late at the prison, he had only to go to the superintendent, and everything was made easy. Besides, everyone in the prison, down to the humblest warder, had grown used to Alyosha. The sentry, of course, did not trouble him so long as the authorities were satisfied. When Mitya was summoned from his cell, he always went downstairs to the place set aside for interviews. As Alyosha entered the room, he came upon Rakitin, who was just taking leave of Mitya. They were both talking loudly. Mitya was laughing heartily as he saw him out, while Rakitin seemed grumbling. Rakitin did not like meeting Alyosha, especially of late. He scarcely spoke to him, and bowed to him stiffly. Seeing Alyosha enter now, he frowned and looked away, as though he were entirely absorbed in buttoning his big, warm, fur-trimmed overcoat. Then he began looking at once for his umbrella. "I must mind not to forget my belongings," he muttered, simply to say something. "Mind you don't forget other people's belongings," said Mitya, as a joke, and laughed at once at his own wit. Rakitin fired up instantly. "You'd better give that advice to your own family, who've always been a slave-driving lot, and not to Rakitin," he cried, suddenly trembling with anger. "What's the matter? I was joking," cried Mitya. "Damn it all, they're all like that." He turned to Alyosha, nodding towards Rakitin's hurriedly retreating figure. "He was sitting here laughing and cheerful, and all at once he boils up like that. He didn't even nod to you. Have you broken with him completely? Why are you so late? I've not been simply waiting, but thirsting for you the whole morning. But never mind, we'll make up for it now." "Why does he come here so often? Surely you were not such great friends?" asked Alyosha. He too nodded at the door through which Rakitin had disappeared. "Great friends with Rakitin? No, not as much as that. Is it likely, a pig like that? He considers I am a blackguard. They can't understand a joke either. That's the worst of such people. They never understand a joke, and their souls are dry, dry and flat. They remind me of prison walls when I was first brought here. But he is a clever fellow, very clever. Well, Alexei, it's all over with me now." He sat down on the bench and made Alyosha sit down beside him. "Yes, the trial's tomorrow. Are you so hopeless, brother?" Alyosha said with an apprehensive feeling. "What are you talking about?" said Mitya, looking at him rather uncertainly. "Oh, you mean the trial! Damn it all! Till now we've been talking of things that don't matter, about this trial, but I haven't said a word to you about the chief thing. Yes, the trial is tomorrow, but it wasn't the trial I meant when I said it was all over with me. Why do you look at me so critically?" "What do you mean, Mitya?" "Ideas, ideas, that's all. Ethics. What is ethics?" "Ethics?" asked Alyosha, wondering. "Yes, is it a science?" "Yes, there is such a science, but I confess I can't explain to you what sort of science it is." "Rakitin knows. Rakitin knows a lot, damn him. He's not going to be a monk. He means to go to Petersburg. There he'll go in for criticism of an elevating tendency. Who knows, he may be of use, and make his own career too. Ugh, they're first-rate, these people, at making a career. Damn ethics! I am done for, Alexei. I am you, man of God. I love you more than anyone. It makes my heart yearn to look at you. Who was Karl Bernard?" "Karl Bernard?" Alyosha was surprised again. "No, not Karl. Stay, I made a mistake. Claude Bernard. What was he? Chemist or what?" "He must be a savant," answered Alyosha, "but I confess I can't tell you much about him either. I've heard of him as a savant, but what sort I don't know." "Well, damn him then. I don't know either," swore Mitya. "A scoundrel of some sort, most likely. They're all scoundrels. And Rakitin will make his way. Rakitin will get on anywhere. He's another Bernard. Ah, these Bernards, they're all over the place." "But what is the matter?" Alyosha asked insistently. "He wants to write an article about me, about my case, and so begin his literary career. That's what he comes for. He said so himself. He wants to prove some theory. He wants to say he couldn't help murdering his father, he was corrupted by his environment, and so on. He explained it all to me. He's going to put in a tinge of socialism, he says. But there, damn the fellow, he can put in a tinge if he likes. I don't care. He can't bear Ivan. He hates him. He's not fond of you either. But I don't turn him out, for he is a clever fellow. Awfully conceited, though. I said to him just now, 'The Karamazovs are not blackguards, but philosophers, for all true Russians are philosophers, and though you've studied, you are not a philosopher, you are a low fellow.' He laughed, so maliciously, and I said to him, 'De ideabus non est disputandum.' Isn't that rather good? I can set up for being a classic, you see." Mitya laughed suddenly. "Why is it all over with you? You said so just now," Alyosha interposed. Why is it all over with me? The fact of it is, if you take it as a whole, I am sorry to lose God. That's why it is." "What do you mean by sorry to lose God?" "Imagine, inside, in the nerves, in the head. That is, these nerves are there in the brain. Damn them! There are sort of little tails, the little tails of those nerves, and as soon as they begin quivering, that is, you see, I look at something with my eyes, and then they begin quivering, those little tails, and when they quiver, then an image appears. It doesn't appear at once, but an instant, a second passes, and then something like a moment appears. That is not a moment, devil take the moment, but an image, that is, an object or an action. Damn it! That's why I see and then think because of those tails, not at all because I've got a soul and that I am some sort of image and likeness. All that is nonsense. Rakitin explained it all to me yesterday, brother, and it simply bowled me over. It's magnificent, Alyosha, this science. A new man's arising, that I understand. And yet I am sorry to lose God." "Well, that's a good thing anyway," said Alyosha. "That I am sorry to lose God?" "It's chemistry, brother, chemistry. There's no help for it, your reverence. You must make way for chemistry. And Rakitin does dislike God. Oh, doesn't he dislike him? That's the sore point with all of them. But they conceal it. They tell lies. They pretend. 'Will you preach this in your reviews?' I asked him. 'Oh, well, if I did it openly, they won't let it through,' he said. He laughed. 'But what will become of men then,' I asked him, 'without God and immortal life? All things are lawful then. They can do what they like?' 'Didn't you know,' he said, laughing, 'a clever man can do what he likes,' he said. 'A clever man knows his way about. But you've put your foot in it, committing a murder, and now you are rotting in prison.' He says that to my face. A regular pig. I used to kick such people out, but now I listen to them. He talks a lot of sense, too. Writes well. He began reading me an article last week. I copied out 3 lines of it. Wait a minute. Here it is." Mitya hurriedly pulled out a piece of paper from his pocket and read, "In order to determine this question, it is above all essential to put one's personality in contradiction to one's reality." Do you understand that? "No, I don't," said Alyosha. He looked at Mitya and listened to him with curiosity. "I don't understand either. It's dark and obscure, but intellectual. Everyone writes like that now, he says. It's the effect of their environment. They're afraid of the environment. He writes poetry too, the rascal. He's written in honour of Madame Holakov's foot." "I've heard about it," said Alyosha. "Have you? And have you heard the poem?" "No." "I've got it. Here it is. I'll read it to you. You don't know. I haven't told you. There's quite a story about it. He's a rascal. 3 weeks ago he began to tease me. 'You've got yourself into a mess like a fool for the sake of 3,000, but I'm going to collar 150,000. I'm going to marry a widow and buy a house in Petersburg.' And he told me he was courting Madame Holakov. She hadn't much brains in her youth, and now at 40 she has lost what she had. But she's awfully sentimental, he says. That's how I shall get hold of her. When I marry her I shall take her to Petersburg, and there I shall start a newspaper." And his mouth was simply watering the beast, not for the widow, but for the 150,000. And he made me believe it. He came to see me every day. "She's coming round," he declared. He was beaming with delight. And then, all of a sudden, he was turned out of the house. Perhotin's carrying everything before him. Bravo! I could kiss the silly old noodle for turning him out of the house. And he had written this doggerel. "It's the first time I've soiled my hands with writing poetry," he said. "It's to win her heart, so it's in a good cause. When I get hold of the silly woman's fortune I can be of great social utility. They have this social justification for every nasty thing they do. Anyway, it's better than your Pushkin's poetry," he said, "for I've managed to advocate enlightenment even in that." I understand what he means about Pushkin. I quite see that. If he really was a man of talent and only wrote about women's feet. But wasn't Rakitin stuck up about his doggerel? The vanity of these fellows. "On the convalescence of the swollen foot of the object of my affections." He thought of that for a title. He's a waggish fellow. A captivating little foot, though swollen and red and tender, the doctors come and plasters put, but still they cannot mend her. Yet 'tis not for her foot I dread, a theme for Pushkin's muse more fit. It's not her foot, it is her head, I tremble for her loss of wit. For as her foot swells, strange to say, her intellect is on the wane. Oh, for some remedy, I pray, that may restore both foot and brain. He's a pig, a regular pig, but he's very arch, the rascal, and he really has put in a progressive idea. And wasn't he angry when she kicked him out? He was gnashing his teeth. He's taken his revenge already, said Alyosha. He's written a paragraph about Madame Holakov. And Alyosha told him briefly about the paragraph in Gossip. That's his doing, Mitya assented, frowning. That's him. These paragraphs, I know, the insulting things that have been written about Grushenka, for instance, and about Katya, too. He walked across the room with a harassed air. Brother, I cannot stay long, Alyosha said, after a pause. Tomorrow will be a great and awful day for you. The judgment of God will be accomplished. I am amazed at you. You walk about here talking of I don't know what. No, don't be amazed at me, Mitya broke in warmly. Am I to talk of that stinking dog, of the murderer? We've talked enough of him. I don't want to say more of the stinking son of stinking Lizaveta. God will kill him, you will see. Hush! He went up to Alyosha excitedly and kissed him. His eyes glowed. Rakitin wouldn't understand it, he began in a sort of exultation. But you'll understand it all. That's why I was thirsting for you. You see, there's so much I've been wanting to tell you for ever so long, here within these peeling walls, but I haven't said a word about what matters most. The moment never seems to have come. Now I can wait no longer. I must pour out my heart to you. Brother, these last 2 months I've found in myself a new man. A new man has risen up in me. He was hidden in me, but would never have come to the surface if it hadn't been for this blow from heaven. I am afraid. And what do I care if I spend 20 years in the mines breaking ore with a hammer? I'm not a bit afraid of that. It's something else I'm afraid of now, that new man may leave me. Even there, in the mines, underground, I may find a human heart and another convict and murderer by my side, and I may make friends with him, for even there one may live and love and suffer. One may thaw and revive a frozen heart in that convict. One may wait upon him for years, and at last bring up from the dark depths a lofty soul, a feeling, suffering creature. One may bring forth an angel, create a hero. There are so many of them, hundreds of them, and we are all to blame for them. Why was it I dreamed of that babe at such a moment? Why is the babe so poor? That was a sign to me at that moment. It's for the babe I'm going, because we are all responsible for all the babes, for there are big children as well as little children, all are babes. I go for all, because someone must go for all. I didn't kill father, but I've got to go. I accept it. It's all come to me here, within these peeling walls. There are numbers of them there, hundreds of them underground, with hammers in their hands. Oh yes, we shall be in chains, and there will be no freedom. But then, in our great sorrow, we shall rise again to joy, without which man cannot live, nor God exist. For God gives joy. It's his privilege, a grand one. Ah, man should be dissolved in prayer. What should I be underground there without God? Rakitin's laughing. If they drive God from the earth, we shall shelter him underground. One cannot exist in prison without God. It's even more impossible than out of prison. And then we men underground will sing from the bowels of the earth a glorious hymn to God, with whom is joy. Hail to God and his joy! I love him! Mitya was almost gasping for breath as he uttered his wild speech. He turned pale, his lips quivered, and tears rolled down his cheeks. Yes, life is full. There is life even underground, he began again. You wouldn't believe, Alexei, how I want to live now. What a thirst for existence and consciousness has sprung up in me within these peeling walls. Rakitin doesn't understand that. All he cares about is building a house and letting flats. But I've been longing for you. And what is suffering? I'm not afraid of it. Even if it were beyond reckoning, I'm not afraid of it now. I was afraid of it before. Do you know, perhaps I won't answer at the trial at all. And I seem to have such strength in me now that I think I could stand anything, any suffering, only to be able to say and to repeat to myself every moment, I exist. In thousands of agonies, I exist. I'm tormented on the rack, but I exist. Though I sit alone on a pillar, I exist. I see the sun, and if I don't see the sun, I know it's there. And there's a whole life in that, knowing that the sun is there. Alyosha, my angel, all these philosophies are the death of me. Damn them. Brother Ivan— What of Brother Ivan? Interrupted Alyosha, but Mitya did not hear. You see, I've never had any of these doubts before, but it was all hidden away in me. It was perhaps just because ideas I did not understand were surging up in me that I used to drink and fight and rage. It was to stifle them in myself, to still them, to smother them. Ivan is not Rakitin. There is an idea in him. Ivan is a sphinx and is silent. He's always silent. It's God that's worrying me. That's the only thing that's worrying me. What if he doesn't exist? What if Rakitin's right, that it's an idea made up by men? Then if he doesn't exist, man is the chief of the earth, of the universe. Magnificent! Only how is he going to be good without God? That's the question. I always come back to that. For whom is man going to love then? To whom will he be thankful? To whom will he sing the hymn? Rakitin laughs. Rakitin says that one can love humanity without God. Well, only a snivelling idiot can maintain that. I can't understand it. Life's easy for Rakitin. You'd better think about the extension of civic rights, or even of keeping down the price of meat. You will show your love for humanity more simply and directly by that than by philosophy. I answered him, well, but you, without a God, are more likely to raise the price of meat if it suits you and make a rouble on every kopeck. He lost his temper. But after all, what is goodness? Answer me that, Alexei. Goodness is one thing with me and another with a Chinaman, so it's a relative thing. Or isn't it? Is it not relative? A treacherous question. You won't laugh if I tell you it's kept me awake 2 nights. I only wonder now how people can live and think nothing about it. Vanity. Ivan has no God. He has an idea. It's beyond me. But he is silent. I believe he is a Freemason. I asked him, but he is silent. I wanted to drink from the springs of his soul. He was silent. But once he did drop a word. What did he say? Alyosha took it up quickly. I said to him, then everything is lawful if it is so? He frowned. Fyodor Pavlovitch, our papa, he said, was a pig, but his ideas were right enough. That was what he dropped. That was all he said. That was going one better than Rakitin. Yes, Alyosha assented bitterly. When was he with you? Of that later. Now I must speak of something else. I have said nothing about Ivan to you before. I put it off to the last. When my business here is over and the verdict has been given, then I'll tell you something. I'll tell you everything. We've something tremendous on hand, and you shall be my judge in it. But don't begin about that now. Be silent. You talk of tomorrow, of the trial, but would you believe it, I know nothing about it. Have you talked to the council? What's the use of the council? I told him all about it. He's a soft, city-bred rogue, a Bernard. But he doesn't believe me, not a bit of it. Only imagine, he believes I did it. I see it. In that case, I asked him, why have you come to defend me? Hang them all! They've got a doctor down too, want to prove I'm mad. I won't have that. Katerina Ivanovna wants to do her duty to the end, whatever the strain. Mitya smiled bitterly. The cat, hard-hearted creature. She knows that I said of her at Mokroe that she was a woman of great wrath. They repeated it. Yes, the facts against me have grown numerous as the sands of the sea. Grigory sticks to his point. Grigory's honest, but a fool. Many people are honest because they are fools. That's Rakitin's idea. Grigory's my enemy, and there are some people who are better as foes than friends. I mean Katerina Ivanovna. I am afraid, oh, I am afraid she will tell how she bowed to the ground after that 4,000. She'll pay it back to the last farthing. I don't want her sacrifice. They'll put me to shame at the trial. I wonder how I can stand it. Go to her, Alyosha. Ask her not to speak of that in the court, can't you? But damn it all, it doesn't matter. I shall get through somehow. I don't pity her. It's her own doing. She deserves what she gets. I shall have my own story to tell, Alexei. He smiled bitterly again. Only Grusha, Grusha! Good Lord, why should she have such suffering to bear? He exclaimed suddenly with tears. Grusha's killing me. The thought of her's killing me, killing me. She was with me just now. She told me she was very much grieved by you today. I know. Confound my temper. It was jealousy. I was sorry. I kissed her as she was going. I didn't ask her forgiveness. Why didn't you? Exclaimed Alyosha. Suddenly Mitya laughed almost mirthfully. God preserve you, my dear boy, from ever asking forgiveness for a fault from a woman you love. From one you love especially, however greatly you may have been at fault. For a woman, devil only knows what to make of a woman. I know something about them anyway. But try acknowledging you were in fault to a woman. Say, I am sorry, forgive me, and a shower of reproaches will follow. Nothing will make her forgive you simply and directly. She'll humble you to the dust, bring forward things that have never happened, recall everything, forget nothing, add something of her own, and only then forgive you. And even the best of them do it. She'll scrape up all the scrapings and load them on your head. They are ready to flay you alive, I tell you, every one of them, all these angels without whom we cannot live. I tell you plainly and openly, dear boy, every decent man ought to be under some woman's thumb. That's my conviction. Not conviction, but feeling. A man ought to be magnanimous, and it's no disgrace to a man, no disgrace to a hero, not even a Caesar. But don't ever beg her pardon all the same for anything. Remember that rule given you by your brother Mitya, who's come to ruin through women. No, I'd better make it up to Grusha somehow, without begging pardon. I worship her, Alexei, worship her. Only she doesn't see it. No, she still thinks I don't love her enough. And she tortures me with her love. The past was nothing. In the past it was only those infernal curves of hers that tortured me. But now I've taken all her soul into my soul, and through her I've become a man myself. Will they marry us? If they don't, I shall die of jealousy. I imagine something every day. What did she say to you about me? Alyosha repeated all Grushenka had said to him that day. Mitya listened, made him repeat things, and seemed pleased. Then she is not angry at my being jealous, he exclaimed. She is a regular woman. I've a fierce heart myself. I love such fierce hearts, though I can't bear anyone's being jealous of me. I can't endure it. We shall fight. But I shall love her infinitely. Will they marry us? Do they let convicts marry? That's the question. And without her I can't exist. Mitya walked frowning across the room. It was almost dark. He suddenly seemed terribly worried. So there's a secret, she says. A secret? We have got up a plot against her, and Katya is mixed up in it, she thinks. No, my good Grushenka, that's not it. You are very wide of the mark in your foolish feminine way. Alyosha, darling, well, here goes. I'll tell you our secret. He looked round, went close up quickly to Alyosha, who was standing before him, and whispered to him with an air of mystery, though in reality no one could hear them. The old warder was dozing in the corner, and not a word could reach the ears of the soldiers on guard. I will tell you all our secret, Mitya whispered hurriedly. I meant to tell you later, for how could I decide on anything without you? You are everything to me. Though I say that Ivan is superior to us, you are my angel. It's your decision will decide it. Perhaps it's you that is superior and not Ivan. You see, it's a question of conscience, question of the higher conscience. The secret is so important that I can't settle it myself, and I've put it off till I could speak to you. But anyway, it's too early to decide now, for we must wait for the verdict. As soon as the verdict is given, you shall decide my fate. Don't decide it now. I'll tell you now. You listen, but don't decide. Stand and keep quiet. I won't tell you everything. I'll only tell you the idea, without details, and you keep quiet. Not a question, not a movement. You agree? But goodness, what shall I do with your eyes? I'm afraid your eyes will tell me your decision, even if you don't speak. Oh, I'm afraid. Alyosha, listen. Ivan suggests my escaping. I won't tell you the details. It's all been thought out. It can all be arranged. Hush, don't decide. I should go to America with Grusha. You know I can't live without Grusha. What if they won't let her follow me to Siberia? Do they let convicts get married? Ivan thinks not. And without Grusha, what should I do there underground with a hammer? I should only smash my skull with the hammer. But on the other hand, my conscience. I should have run away from suffering. A sign has come. I reject the sign. I have a way of salvation, and I turn my back on it. Ivan says that in America, with the good will, I can be of more use than underground. But what becomes of our hymn from underground? What's America? America's vanity again. And there's a lot of swindling in America too, I expect. I should have run away from crucifixion. I tell you, you know, Alexei, because you are the only person who can understand this. There's no one else. It's folly, madness to others, all I've told you of the hymn. They'll say I'm out of my mind or a fool. I am not out of my mind, and I am not a fool. Ivan understands about the hymn too. He understands, only he doesn't answer. He doesn't speak. He doesn't believe in the hymn. Don't speak, don't speak. I see how you look. You've already decided. Don't decide. Spare me. I can't live without Grusha. Wait till after the trial. Mitya ended, beside himself. He held Alyosha with both hands on his shoulders, and his yearning, feverish eyes were fixed on his brother's. They don't let convicts marry, do they? He repeated for the third time in a supplicating voice. Alyosha listened with extreme surprise and was deeply moved. Tell me one thing, he said. Is Ivan very keen on it? And whose idea was it? His, and he is very keen on it. He didn't come to see me at first, then he suddenly came a week ago and he began about it straight away. He is awfully keen on it. He doesn't ask me, but orders me to escape. He doesn't doubt of my obeying him, though I showed him all my heart as I have to you, and told him about the hymn too. He told me he'd arrange it. He's found out about everything. But of that later. He's simply set on it. It's all a matter of money. He'll pay 10,000 for escape, and give me 20,000 for America, and he says we can arrange a magnificent escape for 10,000. And he told you on no account to tell me? Alyosha asked again. To tell no one, and especially not you, on no account to tell you. He's afraid, no doubt, that you'll stand before me as my conscience. Don't tell him I told you. Don't tell him for anything. You are right, Alyosha pronounced. It's impossible to decide anything before the trial is over. After the trial you'll decide of yourself. Then you'll find that new man in yourself, and he will decide. A new man or a Bernard who will decide a la Bernard, for I believe I'm a contemptible Bernard myself, said Mitya with a bitter grin. But, brother, have you no hope then of being acquitted? Mitya shrugged his shoulders nervously and shook his head. Alyosha, darling, it's time you were going, he said with a sudden haste. There's the superintendent shouting in the yard. He'll be here directly. We are late. It's irregular. Embrace me quickly. Kiss me. Sign me with the cross, darling, for the cross I have to bear tomorrow. They embraced and kissed. Ivan, said Mitya suddenly, suggests my escaping. But of course he believes I did it. A mournful smile came onto his lips. Have you asked him whether he believes it? Asked Alyosha. No, I haven't. I wanted to, but I couldn't. I hadn't the courage. But I saw it from his eyes. Well, good-bye. Once more they kissed hurriedly, and Alyosha was just going out when Mitya suddenly called him back. Stand facing me. That's right. And again he seized Alyosha, putting both hands on his shoulders. His face became suddenly quite pale, so that it was dreadfully apparent even through the gathering darkness. His lips twitched, his eyes fastened upon Alyosha. Alyosha, tell me the whole truth as you would before God. Do you believe I did it? Do you in yourself believe it? The whole truth, don't lie, he cried desperately. Everything seemed heaving before Alyosha, and he felt something like a stab at his heart. Hush, what do you mean? He faltered helplessly. The whole truth, the whole, don't lie, repeated Mitya. I've never for one instant believed that you were the murderer, broke in a shaking voice from Alyosha's breast, and he raised his right hand in the air, as though calling God to witness his words. Mitya's whole face was lighted up with bliss. Thank you, he articulated slowly, as though letting a sigh escape him after fainting. Now you have given me new life. Would you believe it, till this moment I've been afraid to ask you, even you. Well, go. You've given me strength for tomorrow. God bless you. Come, go along. Love, Ivan, was Mitya's last word. Alyosha went out in tears. Such distrustfulness in Mitya, such lack of confidence even to him, to Alyosha. All this suddenly opened before Alyosha an unsuspected depth of hopeless grief and despair in the soul of his unhappy brother. Intense, infinite compassion overwhelmed him instantly. There was a poignant ache in his torn heart. Love Ivan, he suddenly recalled Mitya's words. And he was going to Ivan. He badly wanted to see Ivan all day. He was as much worried about Ivan as about Mitya, and more than ever now. End of chapter 4 of book 11.
Book 11, Chapter 5 of the Brothers Karamazov. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Ted Newton. The Brothers Karamazov by Fyodor Dostoyevsky. Translated by Constance Garnett. Book 11, Chapter 5. Not you, not you. On the way to Ivan, he had to pass the house where Katerina Ivanovna was living. There was light in the windows. He suddenly stopped and resolved to go in. He had not seen Katerina Ivanovna for more than a week, but now it struck him that Ivan might be with her, especially on the eve of the terrible day. Ringing and mounting the staircase, which was dimly lighted by a Chinese lantern, he saw a man coming down, and as they met, he recognized him as his brother. So he was just coming from Katerina Ivanovna. It's only you, said Ivan dryly. Well, goodbye. Are you going to her? Yes. I don't advise you to. She's upset, and you'll upset her more. A door was instantly flung open above, and a voice cried suddenly, No, no, Alexei Fyodorovitch, have you come from him? Yes, I have been with him. Has he sent me any message? Come up, Alyosha, and you, Ivan Fyodorovitch, you must come back. You must. Do you hear? There was such a peremptory note in Katya's voice that Ivan, after a moment's hesitation, made up his mind to go back with Alyosha. She was listening, he murmured angrily to himself, but Alyosha heard it. Excuse my keeping my greatcoat on, said Ivan, going into the drawing room. I won't sit down. I won't stay more than a minute. Sit down, Alexei Fyodorovitch, said Katerina Ivanovna, though she remained standing. She had changed very little during this time, but there was such an ominous gleam in her dark eyes. Alyosha remembered afterwards that she had struck him as particularly handsome at that moment. "What did he ask you to tell me?" "Only one thing," said Alyosha, looking her straight in the face, "that you would spare yourself and say nothing at the trial of what," he was a little confused, "passed between you at the time of your first acquaintance in that town?" "Ah, that I bow down to the ground for that money?" She broke into a bitter laugh. "Why? Is he afraid for me or for himself? He asks me to spare. Whom? Him or myself? Tell me, Alexey Fyodorovitch." Alyosha watched her intently, trying to understand her. "Both yourself and him?" he answered softly. "I'm glad to hear it," she snapped out maliciously, and she suddenly blushed. "You don't know me yet, Alexey Fyodorovitch," she said menacingly. "And I don't know myself yet. Perhaps you'll want to trample me underfoot after my examination tomorrow." "You'll give your evidence honorably," said Alyosha. "That's all that's wanted." "Women are often dishonorable," she snarled. "Only an hour ago I was thinking I felt afraid to touch that monster, as though he were a reptile. But no, he is still a human being to me. But did he do it? Is he the murderer?" she cried all of a sudden, hysterically, turning quickly to Ivan. Alyosha saw at once that she had asked Ivan that question before, perhaps only a moment before he came in, and not for the first time, but for the 100th, and that they had ended by quarrelling. "I've been to see Smerdyakov. It was you who persuaded me that he murdered his father. It's only you I believed," she continued, still addressing Ivan. He gave her a sort of strained smile. Alyosha startled at her tone. He had not suspected such familiar intimacy between them. "Well, that's enough anyway," Ivan cut short the conversation. "I'm going. I'll come tomorrow." And turning at once, he walked out of the room and went straight downstairs. With an imperious gesture, Katerina Ivanovna seized Alyosha by both hands. "Follow him, overtake him, don't leave him alone for a minute," she said in a hurried whisper. "He's mad. Don't you know that he's mad? He is in a fever, nervous fever. The doctor told me so. Go, run after him." Alyosha jumped up and ran after Ivan, who was not 50 paces ahead of him. "What do you want?" He turned quickly on Alyosha, seeing that he was running after him. "She told you to catch me up because I'm mad. I know it all by heart," he added irritably. "She's mistaken, of course, but she's right that you are ill," said Alyosha. "I am looking at your face just now. You look very ill, Ivan." Ivan walked on without stopping. Alyosha followed him. "And do you know, Alexey Fyodorovitch, how do people go out of their minds?" Ivan asked in a voice suddenly quiet, without a trace of irritation, with a note of the simplest curiosity. "No, I don't. I suppose there are all kinds of insanity." And can one observe that one's going mad oneself? I imagine one can't see oneself clearly in such circumstances, Alyosha answered with surprise. Ivan paused for half a minute. If you want to talk to me, please change the subject, he said suddenly. Oh, while I think of it, I have a letter for you, said Alyosha timidly. And he took Liza's note from his pocket and handed it out to Ivan. They were just under a lamp-post. Ivan recognized the handwriting at once. Ah, from that little demon, he laughed maliciously, and, without opening the envelope, he tore it into bits and threw it in the air. The bits were scattered by the wind. She's not 16 yet, I believe, and already offering herself, he said contemptuously, striding along the street again. How do you mean, offering herself? Exclaimed Alyosha. As wanton women offer themselves, to be sure. How can you, Ivan? How can you? Alyosha cried warmly, in a grieved voice. She is a child. You are insulting a child. She is ill. She is very ill too. She is on the verge of insanity too, perhaps. I had hoped to hear something from you that would save her. You'll hear nothing from me. If she is a child, I am not her nurse. Be quiet, Alexei. Don't go on about her. I am not even thinking about it. They were silent again for a moment. She'll be praying all night now to the Mother of God to show her how to act tomorrow at the trial, he said sharply and angrily again. You mean Katerina Ivanovna? Yes. Whether she is to save Mitya or ruin him, she will pray for light from above. She can't make up her mind for herself, you see. She has not had time to decide it. She takes me for her nurse too. She wants me to sing lullabies to her. Katerina Ivanovna loves you, brother, said Alyosha sadly. Perhaps, but I am not very keen on her. She is suffering. Why do you sometimes say things to her that give her hope? Alyosha went on with timid reproach. I know that you've given her hope. Forgive me for speaking to you like this, he added. I can't behave to her as I ought. Break off altogether and tell her so straight out, said Ivan irritably. I must wait till sentence is passed on the murder. If I break off with her now, she will avenge herself on me by ruining that scoundrel tomorrow at the trial. For she hates him, and knows she hates him. It's all a lie, lie upon lie. As long as I don't break off with her, she goes on hoping, and she won't ruin that monster, knowing how I want to get him out of trouble. If only that damn verdict would come. The words murderer and monster echoed painfully in Alyosha's heart. But how can she ruin Mitya? He asked, pondering on Ivan's words. What evidence can she give that would ruin Mitya? You don't know that yet. She's got a document in her hands, in Mitya's own writing, that proves conclusively that he did murder Fyodor Pavlovich. That's impossible, cried Alyosha. Why is it impossible? I've read it myself. There can't be such a document, Alyosha repeated warmly. There can't be, because he's not the murderer. It's not he murdered father, not he. Ivan suddenly stopped. Who is the murderer then, according to you? He asked, with apparent coldness. There was even a supercilious note in his voice. You know who, Alyosha pronounced in a low, penetrating voice. Who? You mean the myth about that crazy idiot, the epileptic Smerdyakov? Alyosha suddenly felt himself trembling all over. You know who? Broke helplessly from him. He could scarcely breathe. Who? Who? Ivan cried almost fiercely. All his restraint suddenly vanished. I only know one thing, Alyosha went on, still almost in a whisper. It wasn't you killed father. Not you? What do you mean by not you? Ivan was thunderstruck. It was not you killed father. Not you, Alyosha repeated firmly. The silence lasted for half a minute. I know I didn't. Are you raving? Said Ivan with a pale, distorted smile. His eyes were riveted on Alyosha. They were standing again under a lamp-post. No, Ivan. You've told yourself several times that you are the murderer. When did I say so? I was in Moscow. When have I said so? Ivan faltered helplessly. You've said so to yourself many times, when you have been alone during these 2 dreadful months. Alyosha went on softly and distinctly as before. Yet he was speaking now, as it were, not of himself, not of his own will, but obeying some irresistible command. You have accused yourself and have confessed to yourself that you are the murderer and no one else. But you didn't do it. You are mistaken. You are not the murderer. Do you hear? It was not you. God has sent me to tell you so. They were both silent. The silence lasted a whole long minute. They were both standing still, gazing into each other's eyes. They were both pale. Suddenly, Ivan began trembling all over and clutched Alyosha's shoulder. You've been in my room, he whispered hoarsely. You've been there at night when he came. Confess, have you seen him? Have you seen him? Whom do you mean, Mitya? Alyosha asked, bewildered. Not him! Damn the monster! Ivan shouted in a frenzy. Do you know that he visits me? How did you find out? Speak! Who is he? I don't know whom you're talking about, Alyosha faltered, beginning to be alarmed. Yes, you do know. Or how could you? It's impossible that you don't know. Suddenly, he seemed to check himself. He stood still and seemed to reflect. A strange grin contorted his lips. Brother, Alyosha began again in a shaking voice, I have said this to you because you'll believe my words. I know that. I tell you once and for all, it's not you. You hear? Once for all. God has put it into my heart to say this to you, even though it may make you hate me from this hour. But by now, Ivan had apparently regained his self-control. Alexei Fyodorovich, he said, with a cold smile, I can't endure prophets and epileptics, messengers from God especially. and you know that only too well. I break off all relations with you from this moment and probably forever. I beg you to leave me at this turning. It's the way to your lodgings, too. You'd better be particularly careful not to come to me today. Do you hear? He turned and walked on with a firm step, not looking back. Brother, Alyosha called after him, if anything happens to you today, turn to me before anyone. But Ivan made no reply. Alyosha stood under the lamppost at the crossroads till Ivan had vanished into the darkness. Then he turned and walked slowly homewards. Both Alyosha and Ivan were living in lodgings. Neither of them was willing to live in Fyodor Pavlovitch's empty house. Alyosha had a furnished room in the house of some working people. Ivan lived some distance from him. He had taken a roomy and fairly comfortable lodge attached to a fine house that belonged to a well-to-do lady, the widow of an officer. But his only attendant was a deaf and rheumatic old crone who went to bed at 6 o'clock every evening and got up at 6 in the morning. Ivan had become remarkably indifferent to his comforts of late and very fond of being alone. He did everything for himself in the one room he lived in and rarely entered any of the other rooms in his abode. He reached the gate of the house and had his hand on the bell, when he suddenly stopped. He felt that he was trembling all over with anger. Suddenly he let go of the bell, turned back with a curse, and walked with rapid steps in the opposite direction. He walked 1.5 miles to a tiny, slanting wooden house, almost a hut, where Maria Kondratyevna, the neighbor, who used to come to Fyodor Pavlovitch's kitchen for soup, and to whom Smerdyakov had once sung his songs and played on the guitar, was now lodging. She had sold their little house and was now living here with her mother. Smerdyakov, who was ill, almost dying, had been with them ever since Fyodor Pavlovitch's death. It was to him Ivan was going now, drawn by a sudden and irresistible prompting. End of chapter 5 of book 11.